Special.
Congratulations, happy days to you. You sure brought down the house, and we hope you have a lot of success. Congratulations, Mickey Mouse.
You're wonderful, wonderful, marvelous. I thank our teacher now.
Here's the news. A thaw is on the way, but it's frost again tonight in many parts. And direct from Manchester, we've air pictures of the great lorry convoys still stranded in the Pennines. The Lord's debate on artificial insemination by donor, a government inquiry, our parliamentary correspondent reports. In the Commons, the two-day defence debate has opened. The leaders of the TUC have condemned the Cohen report. Sir Winston Churchill, the final bulletin. At the Old Bailey, Mr. Justice Donovan has begun his summing up in the bright...
BBC Television in the South. BBC Television in the South.
Sunday afternoon,
You would turn the television on, there was nothing on it, just a little dot, and suddenly it went beep, and a man in a dicky bow said, "Good afternoon, this is the
BBC television from the north.
And here for our younger viewers is Sooty. It was massive in those days because there was no competition.
And with the time at exactly 5 minutes to 4, we are now closing down. And as Richard Dimbleby has just told you, we shall be back again with the first of our situation reports. That is a report on the situation as it develops between now and then at 6:30. So until then, goodbye.
This is BBC Television.
This is BBC television.
This is BBC One.
This was BBC Two.
Option. Recent celebrations of the 40th anniversary of BBC Two
Now we come to episode 4 of the serial Smuggler's Bay, called A Reward of £50, and in it...
Top of the Pops now, and at 8 o'clock, Softly Softly.
Now, the first programme in a new series.
Now it's 5 to 5 and time to join Valerie, John and Peter.
Top of the Pops now, and at 8 o'clock, Softly Softly.
On BBC Two now, another Western story of the High Chaparral. On BBC One, for the first time in colour, Panorama.
This is BBC One. Now, Michael Barrett introduces the first edition of a new programme, Nationwide.
BBC Two, hello again, good evening to you from David Allen. In just over a minute, the third programme in our series, Man at Work. Just before the news summary, a look ahead to programmes this evening here on BBC Two. In 5 minutes, George Hamilton IV and Other Folk, the start of George's new series. And at 8 o'clock, a special controversy discussion comes live from the Royal Institution. In the chair will be Professor Sir George Porter.
This is BBC One.
This is BBC One in colour.
Now on BBC One, the news, followed at 9:25 by Cannon.
Now on BBC One, Dick Powell and Ellen Drew star in the Preston Sturges film Christmas in July.
On BBC One in 10 minutes, another mystical adventure with Samantha and Darren in Bewitched. That's after John Craven's News Round.
On BBC Two now, the award-winning play by Jack Rosenthal, The Evacuees. And Christmas evening on BBC One continues with the world television premiere of the feature film starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
This is BBC One North.
At 5:45, Basil Brush invites you to a Christmas wonderland in Basil Through the Looking Glass. But now we're off to see The Wizard of Oz.
Later on tomorrow, here on BBC Two, an invitation to Sing All Ye Faithful in a programme of popular carols sung by local choirs in the chapel of St Mary's College, Strawberry Hill. That's at 12:45 tomorrow afternoon. In 60 Minutes on Two, the original feature film of MASH starring Donald Sutherland. That's after the Old Grey Whistle Test, live from the Rainbow Theatre, London, where we're about to join Radio 1 in stereo for the Kinks' Christmas concert.
Now on BBC One, the education debate considers the fundamental question, what is school for?
Western character Rooster Cogburn in a new film all about his true grit, and that's at 8:45. Right now, BBC One invites you to join all the many guests together with ABBA for the Mike Yarwood Christmas Show.
On BBC Two in a minute, episode 5 of The Mayor of Casterbridge. Here on BBC One, the Sunday film stars José Ferrer in Moulin Rouge.
Spencer in some...
And so now BBC One joins Judy Garland as Dorothy, who, together with the Tin Man, the Straw Man and the Cowardly Lion, is off to see The Wizard of Oz.
A look at the weather details now with Anne Purvis.
Serve broken in the third set, so Gullickson now leading by 1-0 as they go into the third set, and McEnroe faced with winning everything now, all the last 3 sets, if he wants to keep himself in the championship. So that's all the news from Grandstand today. Hope you've enjoyed the programme, and well, we should be back again with Grandstand next week, men's final day. Good night.
In 15 minutes, Noel Edmonds introduces some more new releases to be voted hits or misses in Jukebox Jury. First, on BBC One at 6 o'clock, the news with Kenneth Kendall.
Now on BBC One, Wednesday's edition of Tonight.
Good evening from Westminster, where at just after 10 past 10,
MPs are at this moment voting in the division lobbies on tonight's crucial and perhaps historic motion of no confidence in Jim Callaghan's Labour government.
Well, now to round off our Boxing Day on BBC One, Woody Allen draws on the example of the great Humphrey Bogart and gets plenty of laughs besides in Play It Again, Sam.
On Radio 2, 1500 metres tonight, there's exclusive live coverage of the second half of the fourth round League Cup match between Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa. That's on Radio 2, 1500 metres at 8:02. But here on BBC One Television, it's time to join the Oregon Trail.
In 30 minutes, James Bolam and Rodney Bewes star as the Likely Lads in a Christmas comedy classic. First, on BBC One, some more festive fun in the Terry and June Christmas show.
Now a dangerous assignment in New Jersey faces James Garner in the Rockford Files.
The film was made some 5 years earlier and brought to world prominence Liza Minnelli. Joel Grey and Michael York join her in Bob Fosse's famous atmospheric musical Cabaret.
With Grapevine on libraries at 11:05 and International Rugby Union from New Zealand at 11:35, these are this evening's programmes here on BBC Two. So now on to we tidy up the loose ends in the last part of The Long Search with Ronald Eyre.
And that brings the time to 13 minutes to 4. And from BBC One, good night and good morning.
Now, at 9:30, Swap Shop.
And Michael Parkinson's guests on Saturday are Roy Castle, Billy Eckstein and Celeste Holm. That's Parkinson on Saturday at 9:45. And now for a late night look at the weather, we turn to Anne Purvis.
Good evening. Well, by the end of tonight, we're all going to be in very...
Tonight's feature film was made some 5 years earlier and brought to world prominence Liza Minnelli. Joel Grey and Michael York join her in Bob Fosse's famous atmospheric musical Cabaret.
Well, this is the point where we part company for the night. It's also the end of BBC One's week, celebrating 60 BBC years. So we'll round it off the way the television service used to close in the 50s, with the final strains of the television march by Eric Coates. Have a very pleasant weekend, and from us at the BBC Television Centre, good night for now.
In just over half an hour, BBC Two visits Wincanton for 3 of the day's races and the Parade of Champions, including Red Rum and Aldenite. Here on BBC One now, Boxing Day programmes continue with
The Wonderful World of Disney.
Here on BBC One Scotland, the first showing on British television of the feature film Airport 77.
Well, it's now Christmas morning, 23 minutes past 1, and BBC Two is back in the afternoon at 10 past 2. Well, if you're off to bed now, or perhaps even staying up to make a night of it, then there's always Radio 2, of course, throughout the night. But from us at the BBC Television Centre, let me thank you for your company tonight. Have a very happy Christmas, and good night for now.
And if you recover sufficiently from tonight's double bill, we'll test your nerves again tomorrow at 10:35 with another Hitchcock movie, Dial M for Murder. Written by Frederick Knott from his highly successful stage play, it stars Ray Milland, Robert Cummings, and Hitchcock's favourite actress, Grace Kelly. Dial M for Murder is tomorrow night at 10:35 here on 2. And if you're thinking of going to tomorrow's prom, which is an evening of dance and music from the Far East, let me remind you that seat prices start from as little as £2, while the best seats are £6.50. And of course you can promenade in the famous arena for just £1.10. Tickets are available from ticket agencies or the Royal Albert Hall box office. And if you find that you can't sleep after tonight's horror films, let me remind you that Radio 2 is on the air all night. And at the moment, Pete Murray is presenting his late show. And at 2 o'clock, Richard Clegg is here with You and the Night and the music. But now, with the time at 27 minutes past 1, it's time for us to head for home. So from all of us here on BBC Two, this is David Wheel wishing you all a very good night. And I hope that you have pleasant dreams. Good night.
First on BBC One, we arrive at a milestone in television history with the 1000th edition of Top of the Pops. To begin our simultaneous broadcast in stereo, we now go over to the Radio 1 studio in Broadcasting House and Richard Skinner.
This is BBC One. And now there's a whiff of cordite in the air with Tom Laughlin in the trigger-happy title role of our late-night film, The Master Gunfighter.
This is a story of how it was in early California.
Tomorrow on BBC One, Killer by Night. The city of Los Angeles is threatened with a diphtheria epidemic.
Entertained a lot, huh? Just our luck. She couldn't be a bedridden little old lady. She's got to be a swinger.
We've got a list with 23 possibles. That's only a starter.
Work fast, Larry. We may not catch them all in time.
Robert Wagner stars in Killer by Night, tomorrow at 7:25 on BBC One.
And back in the home of the movies on BBC Two shortly, Russell Harty encounters Stuart Granger, Julio Iglesias and the latest in Californian poolside fashions, while on BBC One delves out of his depth yet again in Only Fools and Horses.
Here on BBC Two now, 40 Minutes. Tonight's programme looks at Bernard Perks, a man with a drink problem, as he's released from prison after a 6-month sentence for shoplifting. The stresses of his life outside prison lead to some strong language.
I'm just bumming around.
And now, before the Wednesday film, tonight's episode of Triangle.
And on now to BBC One's Saturday late film. A riot of fun led by Frankie Howerd up the chastity belt.
Well, there are more cartoons to come on BBC One this afternoon when Daffy Duck presents his Easter special at 3:30. In fact, that's right after our star movie. Elvis Presley plays the second half of a riverboat partnership consisting of Frankie and Johnny. Tomorrow, Elvis is back and in double trouble, pursued by a rich and relentless teenage girl. The time for that, 2 o'clock. Well, now on BBC One, let's hatch out an early Easter egg to reveal Daffy Duck.
Next week, we call in on the Mallinsons, whose home, a terraced house, is in Grimethorpe in Yorkshire. The film, made before the current pit strike, gives an insight into life in a coal mining community. Our house, next Sunday evening at 7:15. Over on BBC One now, gambling man Robbie Box goes in search of the big deal. But will he make it to the racecourse in time to place his bet? Here on 2, in a moment, The Natural World. In Contented Cows and Other Animals, Horizon tomorrow looks at how recent work on farm animal behaviour could lead to an improvement in the animals' welfare, as well as to more productive farming methods.
The herd is beginning to get up after a midday sleep. The cows start grazing as they begin to move across the field. As a result, they're almost all pointing in the same direction, which reduces aggressive head-to-head confrontations over grazing. It's time to cross the bridge. The researchers found that it was always the same few individuals that were at the front of any move, or the first to stand after resting. Other cows were always at the back. Why should it matter to discover these complex social relationships? Because dairy farmers are continually changing their herds, taking cows away and adding new ones. So there's a need to know what effect this has on the cows.
Horizon, Contented Cows and Other Animals is tomorrow at 9:25 on BBC Two. Well, now on to the first of a new series of The Natural World, which looks at the remarkable work of Jane Goodall, who has spent 25 years living among the wild chimpanzees of Tanzania.
But before that, we've an animated feline story as we present, for the first time on British television, the tale of Peter No Tail.
Now, on BBC One, a brand new look to launch the early evening lineup. At 7 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, drama with the EastEnders. On Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, the live and lively entertainment is provided by Terry Wogan.
Newsnight on BBC Two now includes Nicholas Ridley, the British Transport Minister, and the Head of Security at IATA, speaking from Montreal, on what can be done about air safety. Here on One, recorded especially for BBC Television at Wembley Arena, the American singer-songwriter Billy Joel in concert.
Well, in 5 minutes, Pete and Kathy are in for a shock when they return to Albert Square. Before that, a look ahead to a new drama series beginning soon on Saturday nights.
And with the first sighting of BBC One's Christmas symbol, we continue this morning's programmes now with The Littlest Hobo.
Now we return to Earth on BBC One to find Mike Reed ready and waiting to introduce the last in the present series, Pop Quiz.
This is BBC Two. For the next 10 hours, and then on BBC One until 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, we have the greatest rock event of all time, all in aid of famine relief. The live music from London and around the world will begin at 12 o'clock. But first, a reminder of the background of the concert and a look at the harrowing pictures which first inspired Bob Geldof to launch the Band Aid appeal. The reporter is Michael Burke.
Now on One, definitive proof that resistance is useless. A lower low.
Tomorrow morning, Fleur Benjamin and her guests will be here to say hello again in Play School at 8:55. And in 25 minutes, we'll be meeting the regular presenters of Saturday Superstore, whose guests today include actor Paul Nicholas, the London Community Gospel Choir with Welsh singing star Aled Jones, and rock group Status Quo. All that and more coming up at 9 o'clock. But first, it's time to see what sort of mischief a rainy day produces for the Muppet Babies.
We on BBC One now are off to see a different kind of wizard as we follow the yellow brick road to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
A popular cop is shot. Cagney and Lacey have their work cut out for them. Classic police drama in half an hour. On BBC Two now, Renee's got something to hide.
In 20 minutes on BBC One, Andy Crane is here with Children's BBC. Now we fasten our seatbelts for a quick spin with the Pink Panther Show.
This is BBC One.
The 6 o'clock news from the BBC with Nicholas Witchell and Philip Hayton.
Now, on One, a celebration of another bygone era, the rock and roll years of the 1950s, when it was hip to be cool and summer nights led to love for John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John in the film musical Grease.
Because we've more from the George Stevens camp as we join Irene Dunn and Barbara Bell Geddes in a family tale of trials and tribulations with I Remember Mama.
There'll be another extract from Simon King's Country Diary on Sunday evening on BBC One at 11:35.
In the first, comedians Bert Wheeler and Robert Woolsey play a couple of amateur detectives hot on the trail of the murderer of a wealthy music publisher. Betty Grable also stars in The Nitwits. And at 3:30, our second film is I Remember Mama, with Irene Dunn and Barbara Bell Geddes, the tale of a close-knit family setting up home in San Francisco. That takes us up to 5:40, when there's a chance to catch up on the events this weekend in the House of Lords. Microlive is at 6:20 with a report on the use of computerized direct mail to target key groups of voters by American politicians. And there's also news of the latest computerized film animation at the Monte Carlo Television Festival. And at 6:50, Jan Leeming and Moira Stewart present Newsview. Well, that's our lineup for this afternoon here on 2. So now our afternoon begins with the first of 2 films directed by George Stevens, plunging us straight into a world of slapstick humour, fronted by the Nitwits.
In just over an hour, Roger Moore, Telly Savalas and David Niven head the cast of the all-action adventure set in World War II, Escape to Athena. The British comedy, just starting on BBC Two, is the last of the great Ealing comedies. The Lady Killers are up to no good whatsoever, and they include Alec Guinness, Cecil Parker, Herbert Lom and Peter Sellers. Here on 1, in 5 minutes, the contest is on to find the world's strongest man. First, the news from Laurie Mayer.
Andy Crane and Simon Parkin will be back with us for Now It's Christmas, when we start the big day on BBC One tomorrow morning at 6:55. Coming up shortly, we've a Christmas cartoon film featuring Yogi Bear, who's woken from hibernation to enjoy his first Christmas. But before that, let's join someone who should be wide awake already, Bill Giles.
Thanks very much. I don't know about wide awake, I think I'm half asleep.
We join Steve Ryder for coverage of the colourful opening ceremony of the 24th Olympiad in Olympic Grandstand.
On BBC One, we join Esther Ranson for more heartwarming tales of courage and conviction in a special festive edition of Hearts of Gold.
In Gary Shandling's Christmas Show.
So now, let's join Andy Peters and Lisa Jones for 3 whole hours of Christmas Children's BBC.
That was the police. They've started a murder investigation. There's some talk of suicide. You can't build a case on supposition.
I know his death wasn't suicide.
Well, looking back, it's true that my life ran a tepid course. I wasn't unhappy. Then along came Marlene. Tedium is seriously underrated.
I just don't think I'm ever gonna get out of here. I don't think I'm strong enough.
Yes, you will. Don't give up. We're all working for you, but you've got to be strong too.
Drama on 1.
Now on BBC One, drama, comedy and musical come together at the Dominion Theatre, London, for the presentation of the Laurence Olivier Awards, 1989.
Tamas continues next Saturday evening here on 2 at 8:20. New for Mondays on 2.
Starting from next week, you can get this program on your own special aerial in return for a tiny subscription. Just send in £12,000 in small bills, and we will install this simple device in your backyard.
At 9:45, a spot of improvisation from John Sessions.
This is what happens between television programs to keep you interested. It's called a 1950s interlude. The Pot.
At 10:10, Healing Hands. One day in the life of heart surgeon John Walwork.
I perhaps use humour in the same way that other people might use music to relax people.
3 for Monday night on 2. The news over on BBC One now will be followed by the first in a 10-part series of Casualty. Here on BBC Two, in its first showing on BBC television, a rock and roll fantasy thriller directed by Walter Hill in 1984, Streets of Fire. At 10:15 tomorrow evening on 2, Alex Cox introduces another in the season of classic cult movies. The science fiction fantasy THX 1138, directed by George Lucas of later Star Wars fame and starring Robert Duvall and Donald Pleasence, is set in the 25th century, in a world where humans have been reduced to soulless automatons and computers are in charge. Moviedrome is at 10:15 tomorrow on 2.
The heat is on for the next fortnight, and unless you've got a ticket, the only way to watch Wimbledon will be on BBC television. So put your feet up and do it in style.
In half an hour, we've a 40-minute film, Scarf's Follies. This is in place of the scheduled tennis from Eastbourne, which we won't be able to provide because of industrial action. But we can turn our attention to today's cricket and the second test from Lord's between England and Australia. For highlights of the third day's play, we join Richie Benno.
It's the name of the game, and I want to play the game with you. Life can be terribly tame if you don't play the game with two.
And you too can join in the games at 6:25, before which, for better for worse, those once confirmed bachelors Del and Rodney now find their lives transformed by attachment. Only fools and horses.
Over on BBC Two in a moment, Holiday Outing visits India and discovers the diversity of cultures that make up this land of extremes. India's Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi is the special guest in On the Record here on BBC One on Sunday afternoon at 1:30. giving a fascinating insight into the complexities of Indian politics. In just over half an hour, here on One, you can catch up on England's progress against Australia in the Ashes, as well as tennis highlights from today's US Open matches from Flushing Meadow. Now, on BBC One, matchmaking of a different kind in EastEnders.
New drama coming soon on 2. Later tonight at 11:25 on 2, International Snooker brings you the best of today's play at the Hong Kong Masters Tournament. This is BBC Two, and now Newsnight.
Now on to the last in the series of artist journeys. Tony Cragg is off to Romania in search of clues that may lead him closer to the influences in Constantine Brancusi's artistic life.
World-class action on the ice now on BBC Two, introduced by Sue Barker.
Now on BBC Two, the programme that really knows its Arsenal from its elbow.
This is BBC Two. We now provide coverage of the Masters Snooker from Wembley Conference Centre, where we join Doogie Donnelly.
Errand of mercy for the crew of the Enterprise now on BBC Two in Star Trek.
TV for the brave first on BBC Two, The Sunday Show.
Now on BBC Two, a children's delight, a secret in Suffolk and a blooming freak. Gardener's World.
Now on BBC Two, Captain Frank Drebin exercises his amazing detection skills. Only the innocent need fear. Police Squad.
After years of longing and looking forward, finally it's goodbye mucky Leeds, hello magical Morecambe. But retirement isn't all it's cracked up to be, not even with a sunset across the bay, as tonight's play in our Alan Bennett season proves.
Skyscrapers. Why wait for a lift when you can crawl up the outside? An extreme challenge now on BBC Two in They Who Dare.
Now, on BBC Two, by way of a tribute to Audrey Hepburn, who died last month, we're showing her Oscar-winning performance as the princess who falls in love with an American journalist, played by Gregory Peck, in the classic romantic comedy Roman Holiday.
An exclusive world premiere on BBC Two now, with the concert recorded earlier this evening. Mike Oldfield performs Tubular Bells 2 from Edinburgh Castle.
An MGM classic adventure now on BBC Two. Robert Taylor and Elizabeth Taylor star in Ivanhoe.
BBC Two falls into the hands of the two fat ladies now with the tastiest and juiciest comedy cuts.
Now on BBC Two, Rock Docs presents an omnibus film on Leonard Cohen, Songs from a Life.
It's all a matter of honour here on BBC Two now, as Keith Carradine and Harvey Keitel become embroiled in a long and bloody feud. Set at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, Ridley Scott directs his first film, The Duelists.
Here on BBC Two, a man with a mission to investigate beer. A difficult job, but someone's got to do it.
Now on BBC Two, Sandy Toksvig introduces those who are refurbishing the decorators for the 21st century.
Before which, we've comedy in the company of Forbes Hamilton and De Vere, To the Manor Born.
Well, if you're expecting to find us at the door of the Skill Shop now, there's been a slight change to tonight's schedule, which means that we'll be open for business in 50 minutes at the later time of 25 past midnight. This is BBC One. Now, as tributes flood in from all corners of the music world to the late Freddie Mercury, who died last night, we've a celebration of his life and career with a special introduction from Elton John.
Freddie Mercury,
Start of BBC One's marathon fundraising extravaganza, in which Terry Wogan, Sue Cook and Andy Peters host 7 hours of star-studded entertainment for children in need.
A year ago, almost to the day, Hyacinth was busily keeping up appearances and preparing for the Christmas festivities. This is what happened next.
This is BBC Two. Now, lock the door.
Now on to the threat of mass destruction prompts international rescue into a countdown to action.
Well, first on BBC One, an awkward mix of business and pleasure for Jimmy Nail as the offbeat Geordie cop, Spender.
Christmas Sunday on BBC One.
How did your nose get so long?
It was where my nanny used to lift me out of the bus. Morecambe and Wise Christmas Show, tonight at 11:10 on BBC One.
A movie premiere for Christmas night now on BBC One, starring Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore and Whoopi Goldberg in Oscar-winning form. Ghost.
Now on BBC One, Noel Edmonds travels the world to deliver some very special Christmas presents.
The she-devil is back. Dennis Waterman.
My wife creates havoc and destruction all around her. She destroys everybody's happiness.
Patricia Hodge.
Pity on me. Love me. Live with me.
Julie T. Wallace.
I was not to embarrass my husband in front of his parents. I must play the good wife.
The life and loves of a she-devil, beginning tomorrow at 10:15 on BBC One.
Starting with Children in Need, a new dimension in television is coming at you on BBC One. A third dimension that will bring you-know-who right into your home for a special 2-part adventure. With David Bellamy Johnny, you come face to face with some of nature's wildest beasts. You'll feel you're on stage with the bands in Top of the Pops. And Lost at Sea with the Blue Pizza Crew. You'll need to buy a pair of these 3D glasses, available in shops now, to discover why 3D Week is a real spectacle, starting Friday at 8 on BBC One.
The preview of Friday's big day, Children in Need, Pause for Pudsey in 50 minutes on BBC One. Another amazing story from Steven Spielberg now, The Mission, starring Kevin Costner and Kiefer Sutherland. In an hour from now, The Mission, one of Steven Spielberg's amazing stories starring Kevin Costner and Kiefer Sutherland. Now, on BBC One, a brief escape from Albert Square with a weekend in Amsterdam for a few of our East Enders.
The Secret Life of Lady Chatterley.
Where are you going?
Just to the woods.
But what when folk find out? Think how lowered you'll feel. I couldn't bear it if you were unhappy. Seems I'm to be broken open again.
Why on earth did you lock the doors?
I want you. I want you now. Did you know there's a rumour you're going to supply Ragdig with an heir?
You'd never tell him, would you? You'd never want to give me away.
I could die for the touch of a woman like you.
Jolie Richardson is Lady Chatterley. Tomorrow, 9:35 on BBC One. In 1975, when going green upset the neighbours,
Sheer folly.
there was one pioneering family.
Tom? Man said the goat will be here by noon.
Lovely.
Paul Eddington, Penelope Keith, Felicity Kendall and Richard Bryars in the very first episode of The Good Life. Classic comedy, Tuesday at 8 on BBC One.